Hello and welcome back to Election Time News, your one-stop for political summations, poll reviews, nonpartisan predictions, and reviews and compilations on other political forecasters. Today is Friday, October 11th, 2024, and today I will be updating my Senate map based on previous elections, essentially just based on incumbency, polls from 538, Real Clear Polling, and DDHQ in the Hill, as well as a bit based on polymarket odds. However, again, it has kind of been taken over by a bit of the right wing recently, but I will definitely still be reviewing some of these odds as well. Now, if you like content like this, make sure to subscribe. I do lots of content like this. I'll be giving weekly updates on my presidential election predictions every single Tuesday, leading all the way up to a final prediction the morning of Election Day. I'll also give updates, such as this one on the Senate map, every single Friday. So I also have a goal of 500 subscribers by Election Day, so do me a favor and click on that bright red button, help us get there. We recently hit 150. Thank you all so much for the support. I am working hard to get all the way to 500. I think that I can do it. So, now also make sure to join the Discord, get alerts when I upload, take part in election simulation, or test your prediction skills, stay up to date on map changes even when there's not a video being released, and more. That link will be in the description. So now onto the video here. We have the Senate map for 2024. It is just the exact same as it was in 2018, except with the exception, of course, of special elections. There is no special election in Minnesota, and there is one in Nebraska this year. So, looking here at our map, we can see a few things changed. And these are the incumbents for this year. Now we can fill in our safe states that are absolutely going to one candidate or the other. We have Washington, California, Hawaii, New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Maine. And then for the Republicans, we have the special election in Nebraska, Utah, Mississippi, Tennessee, Indiana, Missouri, North Dakota, and Wyoming. Now, the rest of these states are somewhat contested, but then, of course, here's West Virginia. Now, I wanted to point this out because this actually is a flip. Senator Joe Manchin managed to win by 3.2% back in 2018, but he is now retiring. And looking here at, I'm not sure if we actually... All right, over here, popular governor, Republican Governor Jim Justice is now running for Senate in West Virginia, and it is a very red state. It went to Donald Trump by 34 points or so in 2020. It was 30-some point margin, so not even close. And so, obviously, he's going to sweep it. As you can see here, 99%, which for polymarket, in other words, is saying it is absolutely guaranteed. So that's actually the first flip for the Republicans, getting them closer to a 51 or 50 seat majority, if 50 seats if they win the presidency, or they would need 51 if Kamala Harris is to win. So for right now, we will just be saying that because of how close the presidential election is, we will be saying that you need 51 for a majority just so it's foolproof, even if the presidency goes as a party does not expect. So, now looking here are some of the contested states. Now, New Mexico is probably the least contested of the states that I do have here selected. Going into New Mexico, it's not very close. Heinrich by 13 points. That is a safe margin. So I just missed that one. I didn't realize exactly how far scope it was. I was trying to be very conservative on which ones I call safe. But we have safe here is going to be 10 or above. Likely here is going to be 7 to 10. Here we have, less than 2 points is going to be tilt. 2 to 5 is going to be lean. 5 to 10 is going to be likely, and then 10 or above is going to be safe. And that goes for both candidates, obviously. So now, as you can see here, 47 to 41, the Republicans definitely have a an edge here, and Democrats are mainly playing defense. Looking back over here, only Texas and Florida currently have Republicans in their seat currently, as well as Nebraska. So keeping it as it is, if there was to be a complete Democratic sweep of all of the states, then it would be 50-50. But of course, that's not necessarily going to be the case. There's a few very interesting things going on here. First off, something of note is that in Maine, it's actually not a Democrat running. Instead, it is actually an independent. Doesn't have a race on there, but I don't know why it defaulted to Texas. Maine. Looking in Maine, it's actually an independent king, but he is absolutely destroying the competition. 30 points. There is no chance that Cozonos is going to win. I probably butchered her last name. My apologies. So next up, of course, we're going to look at the likely margin states here. So next up is going to be Nevada. Rosen is ahead by 9 in a recent one by Emerson College. And if we look over here, let me see if I can find. Okay, so just these swingy state ones are available. So looking down, I'm not sure if the Nevada Senate here, Rosen up by 8. This is the Emerson Hill poll done right here. 782 has Rosen up by 16. But looking at the average here, Rosen is ahead by 9.2%. So that is going to be a likely margin. Nevada polls are actually generally relatively accurate. So if anything, they actually do end up typically underestimating the Democratic Party instead of the usual. And looking here at polling market, it does have Rosen with an 87% chance of winning the state of Nevada. Looking here, 9.1% lead. She is out of the margin of error, which is 95% of polls falling within that range. So that's almost the most extreme scenario. She is still ahead. So that's almost a completely guaranteed win for Rosen in the state of Nevada. Next up is going to be Arizona. Looking here, we have a not very contested competition between Gallego and Lake. Now, Gallego has just barely breached 50%, and Lake is sitting at 42%, 7.7 point lead recently, even by the right-wing channels of On Point Politics and Red Eagle Politics. Their own poll, 735 likely voters, found Gallego up by 13 points. So it's a very big sign for the Gallego campaign. They are doing very well in the state of Arizona. Probably not going to be there anywhere. I'm not sure. There we go. Gallego +7 in this one. And then here, Gallego +7 as well. So probably close to about 7 to 8 points when it comes down to election night. But it's not going to be necessarily all that close for... It's not going to be much of a contest for Carrie Lake. She wasn't really in the game that much. And she's generally, from what I can tell, she is somewhat generally just disliked in the state of Arizona. Here, Gallego has a 7.9% lead in the polling average. So quite a bit of a considerable lead. Polling market has Gallego up 89-11. And looking here, Cinema, I believe, moved on to a different post. But 2.3%, that's going to be a large shift to the left. But Rosen won by 5 points. And generally, incumbents improve on their initial elections, unless there's a significant change, such as we're going to see in Montana. So, we will get to that, because that is a much closer race. Next up is going to be the state of Virginia. So looking here at the state of Virginia, this is actually a not a very close race either. This is going to be basically a safe Democratic state here. 12.9% lead for Kane Tim Kaine, of course, it was Hillary Clinton's running mate in 2016. Here, Kaine is ahead by 20. Makes you think I might bump it up to safe just because of these large margins. There's basically no shot. 12-point, 8-point lead. Yeah, and then over here, Polling Market 94-6. I actually am going to put it in safe just because those margins I think have gone up considerably. Yeah, it was closer to about 11 points, but now it's at 13 or so. So Virginia is now actually safe. That's quite a bit of a spike up. Looking here now at the Rust Belt Quartet of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, starting in the state of Minnesota. Looking here, we have Klobuchar up by 11 points on 538. Looking here on Real Clear Polling, if we can find a poll here. I don't like how few they have of non-competitive states. Generally, 530 has one of all of them. For some reason, it's not even on the list on DDHQ in the Hill. So, just looking at 538, 11.2 point lead. Yeah, there's very, very few polls. Klobuchar up by 8, up by 11. So, probably going to be close to about a 10-point victory on election night. But just to be a bit conservative as far as her margin of victory, I'm going to put her in as likely. I could see it going up to probably about 11 points on election night, depending on how well the national environment does compared to the polling. But just to be safe, I'm going to put it there. I might adjust it before my final prediction video. Wisconsin is going to be next. This is one of the main Rust Belt trio states this election cycle. But while it is very competitive for the presidential level, it does not appear to be so competitive on the... Oh, I can scroll. Okay. So it does not appear to be so competitive on the Senate level, as Baldwin's ahead by 4 in this poll, 1 for 7-2-2-7. It appears to be very not precise, but there's quite a few polls where there's a lot of room for Baldwin. Here on the polling average on 538, she's ahead by 5 points or so, has been for quite some time. And looking at DDHQ in the Hill, she is currently ahead by 4 points, only 4 points, and then 4.9. But then again, looking at polling market, she does have an impressive 79% chance of winning. She is an incumbent. She won by almost 11 points back in 2018, which, yes, was a very good year for Democrats, but still a very impressive victory. And looking back here, I'm going to actually put it in again as likely. I'd say probably somewhere between, actually likely, no, I'm doing margins here. Probably going to be somewhere around 3 to 5 points on election night, so that's actually going to be a lean margin here. Not a sweeping victory, but probably going to be a relatively sound victory. Nothing to panic about for the Democrats. Next up is going to be the state of Michigan, which is going to be relatively safe for Slotkin. Now, it has been narrowing, interestingly. She had about... Slotkin had about a almost a 6-point lead in mid-September, but it has been narrowing since then, and now they only have a 4.3% lead. And looking in at the thing here, we have +5, +1 tie right here from Quinnipiac University on October 9th. Last week, we had a Slotkin +5 poll. And then looking back in on DDHQ in the Hill, in Michigan, Slotkin has a 3.4-point lead. So that's even less than on 538. But I do see, again, a lean margin. It's probably going to be around 3 to 5 points or so. And again, Poly Market has a 75-25 chance, basically 3/4 chance of a victory in the state of Michigan, which actually I think is, believe it or not, the lowest of the trio, just barely. Casey Jr. Yeah, so actually the lowest of the trio, but they are all in the 70% ranges for the Democrats, which brings us to our next state of Pennsylvania. I think it's going to be another lean margin. Looking here at the polling averages for all three here, Casey's ahead by a flat 5%. I think he's going to slightly underperform that, though. Based on this, here, Casey +2, Casey +8, Casey +2, Casey +7. These lack of precise polling is typically a relatively bad sign for the accuracy of the polls as well. So, depends on how the national environment shifts from the polling environment. In Pennsylvania here, Casey 3.7 point lead. So quite a bit of a difference here, 5 points to 3.7%, but I think he's going to be a bit under that, and probably closer to about 4 points on election night. Coming in here again, Bob Casey Jr. does have a 78% lead ahead of Alyssa Slotkin and Tammy Baldwin. So that's going to wrap up the quartet. Next up, we're going to go down to Florida and Texas, and then we're going to handle the final three, the most swingy. So these two are probably going to go Republican. Florida, I currently have lean Republican. It's not going to go all that hard for the current. It's not going to go that hard for Scott. He only won by 0.12% in 2018, and it was a very good year for Democrats in the national environment, but still a relatively narrow lead, even as far as that goes. Mercursel Powell had some good polls coming in. Scott +2. I don't know why there's essentially no polls showing up here. There's quite a few on 538. Scott +2, and 2 +9 from Siena College and New York Times, but +3 from 3,000 likely voters from Renfield and Wilton Strategies, but it appears that things have been starting to go back up at 1,410 registered voters by Marist College, Scott +2. So I think this is going to be a relatively close lineup. I think they are going to slightly underestimate Republicans in the state of Florida, however, so they're just going to end up being a red state. Now, Poly Market, I think, overestimates this a little bit with an 89% chance. I think it's probably closer to about 85 or so not really that much lower, but it's probably going to go to Scott by about 3 points or so. So, yeah, DDHQ in the Hill is a bit closer to what I'd expect. 4.5 points is a bit much, but I think it is, in general, going to go a bit closer to somewhere between 3.2 points and some of these 2-point recent polls. So probably closer to about 3.5 points on election night. Going into Texas. Now, this one was originally said to be safe for incumbent Ted Cruz, but in 2018, he only managed to keep the seat by 2.6% against Beto O'Rourke, and this year it has been turning up to be potentially competitive. He is currently ahead by 3.6%, and some of these recent polls haven't been looking all too good for challenger Colin Allred, but some of these have been looking relatively close. There's been quite a few polls, actually, where Cruz was only ahead by a few. There actually was one by Morning Consult, which is a left-leaning pollster, but still, 2,716 likely voters had Allred up by 1. So the fact that he even was leading in 1 is a red flag for. I do believe that the Republicans even started investing in this seemingly safe race. Cruz +4, Cruz +5, Cruz +4. Looking at the average here on DDHQ and the Hill, we can see that Cruz is ahead by 2.7%. So you can see here, Allred has been closing in, and here was about 5.2%. So he has basically halved his margin in a month and a half. So that wouldn't be enough to flip it, but if this trend does continue or even narrow, that would even actually have it enough to be even a tilt margin. So I actually am going to put it tilt for right now. actually lowering it down from lean, however that was probabilities. But I don't think it's going to go blue. I do think that the Republicans are going to hold on to the seat for just a bit. There's a chance that it might flip in 2030, but 2030. But as of right now, this seat looks like it's just barely going to go Republican, probably by about a point. So it's going to get very close. There's definitely a chance that it actually will go blue. Polling market doesn't agree necessarily, 84%, 16%, but I do believe that Colin Allred's chances have doubled essentially in the past month. Now we are down to the last three, starting in Montana. Now things started out looking good for incumbent Jon Tester. They started out looking good for the incumbent Jon Tester. It looked like he was going to hold on to his seat in March and continuing into May, but then he started to drop. Then it looks like he was going to get momentum and flip things back around in early August, but since then things have gotten worse and worse and worse, and it looks like it is beyond saving. So he is now 80-20 on Poly Market against Tim Sheehy. Challenger, he only won the seat by 3.6% in 2018, of course, being a very good year for the Democratic Party. Recent polls, Sheehy up by 8 and up by 8 again. So these have not been friendly polls for the incumbent. And so based on that, I'm definitely going to have to Tim Sheehy here averaging at 5.4% on DH2 in the Hill, 7.3%. I'm going to have this actually be a likely margin, because if these trends continue towards election night, I see this definitely going red by almost 6 points, unless there's a large shift in the overall national environment, or even just the state environment in Montana compared to the polls. Unless we see something like we did in 2022, there is no shot that Jon Tester is going to hold on to his seat in Montana. I do even believe that Democrats have essentially given up funding this race. Now, the state of Ohio. This one is very close. It is the incumbent Brown won by 7 points in Ohio in 2018. Now, Ohio went by 8 points for Donald Trump in 2016 and then did again in 2020. He is holding a 1.7 point lead in the polls on DDHQ and the Hill, and comparing that to 538, 2.3 points. So this is probably the closest Senate race, as you see here. It's right up on the top. The closest Senate race right now: Brown +1, Brown +2, Brown +4, Brown +4, Brown +2. I don't think there actually are really any new polls that have Marino up in the lead. There's these two from mid-September. All these more recent ones all have Brown in the lead. But this traction, this growing traction for Marino is really concerning, especially with these Brown +1s. That is well within the margin of error. So I have this race in the pure toss-up category. It could really go either way on election night. I do still think it's going to go probably about a point for Brown, just because he's the incumbent, but not enough to actually say that it is going to go blue on election night. So I am now dropping it from Tilt D to a pure toss-up race. Now, next up is going to be Nebraska, which is surprisingly actually a competitive race, same as Texas. It looked like it was going to be safe for the incumbent, which is interesting considering how the current incumbent, Fisher, won by 19.1% 6 years ago, but Deb Fisher is now only 2 points ahead in the polling average against challenger Osborn. These recent ones done by Dan Osborn, so you'd shift it to the right 2 points. That would be a tie. This one, Bullfinch group done by the Independent Center, that technically counts as an internal poll, and so that would be Osborn +3. This one internal, Osborn +1, but it still is very, very close to parity on some of these polls. So it's actually very surprisingly close as far as this goes. Now, again, there could just be a large polling error of some sort, but it does definitely appear that there is a chance that Osborn could pull off an upset. If there's going to be any... On DDHQ in the Hill, Osborn actually has the lead. There's a more recent poll here that has Fisher up by 2, but even then, this one has Osborn up by 5, Osborn up by 1. But here, this Osborn up by 5 poll actually brought him into a strong lead. So, but Nebraska is just such a strong red state that I have it tilt red on my map as of right now. But it is so close, I can't really tell. I'd almost put it as toss-up, but just because she is the incumbent in solid red Nebraska, like 20 points for Trump, 18 for Trump or so in 2020, I don't see it going for the independent as of right now. Now, Republicans have started even spending in the state, and they've been giving ads for Deb Fischer in the state, which proves that they realize that it is competitive. But Polymarket does have the state going for Deb Fischer. However, Dan Osborn's chances have been going up steadily for the past while, so he definitely has a chance. I just don't see it happening as of right now. So this is our finished Senate map based on predicted margins on election night. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss my election night live stream, which will start at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and I will go until 1:30 a.m. Eastern Time, or potentially later. Now, thank you all so much for watching again, and have a fantastic rest of your day.